In a small, rural Mississippi town, one team was determined to play basketball despite the unwritten rule of a culture rooted in racial segregation. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the Mississippi State University basketball team dominated the Southeastern Conference, winning championships in 1959, 1961, 1962, and 1963. Although these championships gave Mississippi State an automatic bid to the NCAA men's basketball tournament, the team was prohibited from leaving Starkville to play in the tournament because Mississippi politicians barred them from competing against integrated teams. The conflict that resulted from the state government denying the team the chance to compete in the NCAA tournament climaxed in 1963 when the team decided to defy the politicians and sneak out of the state to face the Ramblers of Loyola Chicago in East Lansing, Michigan, and it all happened in the dark of night. When James Meredith attempted to enroll at the University of Mississippi, more commonly referred to as Ole Miss, he set in motion what some scholars have considered to be the last gasp of the Civil War. President Kennedy, in direct challenge to Governor Barnett's claims to keep Ole Miss segregated, federalized the Mississippi National Guard to maintain order after sneaking Meredith onto the Ole Miss campus the night of September 30th.
However prominent or powerful, and no mob, however unruly or boisterous, is entitled to defy a court of law. The eyes of the nation and all the world are upon you and upon all of us.
As rumors that Meredith would enroll the next morning spread across campus, many students began to gather in front of the Lyceum building where his enrollment was scheduled to take place. The crowd continued to grow and eventually evolved into a full-fledged riot. During the riot, French journalist Paul Guillard and repairman Ray Gunter were murdered and hundreds of others were injured. After the events at Ole Miss, other southern states began to lose their fight for segregation little by little. The next year, the Mississippi State basketball team decided to compromise against some of their beliefs in order to play the game they loved, no matter who the opponent was. James Meredith's enrollment at Ole Miss had a paramount effect on the team's mindset the following season. During the 1963 basketball season, Mississippi State once again dominated the league with 12 wins and only 2 losses, and were invited to the NCAA tournament. The Mississippi State team, administration, and alumni were finally fed up with staying at home while the second-place Kentucky Wildcats attended the tournament in their place. President Dean Colvard formally accepted the invitation to the tournament on March 2nd of 1963.
The administration at MSU was in favor of us going. Of course, the coach was as well, and the players. The student body was overwhelmingly in favor of us going. But it was the politicians in Jackson that was holding on to, the old way of things.
In response, Mississippi Governor Ross Barnett, an avid segregationist, claimed that he would do anything in his power to prevent the Bulldogs from playing an integrated team.
The politicians in Mississippi at that time, they were way off base.
Mississippi Senator Billy Mitz introduced a bill onto the Senate floor that would ban Mississippi teams from competing in postseason games against integrated teams in an attempt to make the unwritten rule written. The Mississippi Board of Trustees of the Institutions of Higher Learning approved President Colvard's decision just hours before the team was scheduled to leave Starkville. However, Senator Mitz and a local judge drafted an injunction to keep the team from traveling to the tournament. Both President Colvard and Coach McCarthy fled Mississippi in hopes of meeting the team in Nashville to fly to East Lansing, Michigan for the game. President Colvard had a speaking engagement in Alabama the night before the team was scheduled to leave and met the team in Nashville afterwards, unbeknownst to the politicians in Jackson. Coach McCarthy, however, rode down back roads towards the Tennessee state line when he got stopped by the police and had to hide under the floorboards of a car to avoid being seen by the officer. After the encounter, McCarthy successfully met the team and President Colvard in Nashville. On March 15, 1963, at Michigan State's Jensen Fieldhouse, the Mississippi State Bulldogs were scheduled to play the Ramblers of Loyola, Chicago, in today's equivalent of the Sweet 16. Before tip-off, Jerry Harkness of Loyola and Joe Dangold of Mississippi State met at center court to shake hands. This simple gesture is considered one of the most significant moments in NCAA basketball history and symbolized the compromise between two teams with different upbringings, one team surrounded by a government rooted in racial segregation, and one team that broke racial barriers by starting 4 African American players. Loyola defeated Mississippi State by a score of 61-51 and went on to beat the 2-time defending national champion Cincinnati by a score of 60-58. The Ramblers defied many obstacles and prejudices throughout the season on the way to becoming the first integrated basketball team to win the national championship game. This game has been coined the Game of Change and has gone down in history as a significant step forward in the fight against racial segregation. Both President Colbert and Coach McCarthy's legacy of defying the unwritten rule of the state government and other numerous achievements are honored by having buildings on the Mississippi State campus named after them. Although this was a monumental step towards racial equality in the South, there were still many challenges that African Americans faced in their struggle for equality. Even after playing the integrated team from Loyola, Mississippi State did not integrate for another 2 years. In July of 1965, Richard Holmes of Starkville, Mississippi, became the first African American admitted to the university. The integration of Mississippi State occurred without an incident, which was a stark comparison to the integration of the University of Mississippi 3 years prior in 1962.
But I think Mississippi State is doing a really, really good job in reference to trying to be more inclusive and finding ways to include those populations in different things, such as our student association on campus.
There are still many aspects of the Old South visible today. The Mississippi State flag is a lasting symbol of the racial inequality that has been entrenched in Mississippi history since 1894. At the time of its implementation, the flag represented the core Confederate values, specifically segregation and discrimination. Although Mississippi has made significant progress in terms of racial equality, the prevalence of the flag does not reflect Mississippi's growth. While some Mississippi residents value the state flag for its history, many key leaders, such as U.S. Senators Thad Cochran and Roger Wicker, House Speaker Philip Gunn, and Treasurer Lynn Finch, recognize the need to replace the state flag. Much like Coach McCarthy, President Colbert, and the 1963 Mississippi State basketball team, many professional athletes today protest the mistreatment of African Americans and other minorities by law enforcement officers through kneeling during the national anthem.
We in this country are free to protest any way that we see fit, as long as we're not breaking any laws, harming anybody, bringing harm to ourselves. People have to get used to being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because I think that's the only way that a lot of people are going to be able to have a chance or get a chance to actually know people from different demographics. They're protesting, peacefully protesting the national anthem. And they're not necessarily protesting the national anthem, they're protesting the treatment of blacks in this country. So that's one thing, because I think it's been misconstrued in the United States of why they're actually protesting. They're protesting because of the treatment or the mistreatment of blacks in this country by law enforcement.
Although these actions are controversial, it's important to recognize current athletes utilizing their First Amendment right to peacefully assemble in the face of conflict, just as the Mississippi State basketball team did in 1963.